Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. We will get started in just a moment. Thank you all for joining today. All right. Good afternoon, good morning. It's 2 p.m. Eastern, I believe 11 Pacific. Um, we appreciate you joining the conversation today with Mary Means. My name is Nathan Davis. I'm the Programs Committee Chair of the LGBTQ and Planning Division. We're so excited to have this event and have you all join us today. We'll get right into it. We have a few intro slides and then we'll start the conversation. So a bit about the division. We are one of the population-based divisions of the American Planning Association. We represent LGBTQ members and allies of within the American Planning Association. There are a few opportunities to get involved. We're always looking for anybody who wants to help put on events, do communications, support our members throughout the country. So if you'd like to get involved, we have our various committees here. You can reach out to us. My email is the top there. So I'm always looking for volunteers to help put on other events like this. A quick note about the CM credits. If you'd like to claim a CM credit for this, there's one credit and then one equity credit as well. And this is the code to claim that. On March 26th, we'll have another event also focused on Main Streets. It's LGBTQ visibility in Main Streets. It's from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 10 to 11:30 Pacific Time. So this is going to be with Main Street leaders from Biddeford, Maine, Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Kent, Ohio. I wanted to note that we are doing a book giveaway of Mary's memoir today. It's called Something Worth Saving. So later on in the conversation, we'll push out a push poll for you to submit your contact information. Um, if you're selected to win one of the 3 copies of the book, we'll reach out for your mailing address and then we'll get that sent to you. If you don't win one of the book giveaways, but would still like to read her books, you can buy the paperback version or audiobook version of the memoir at her website, marymeans.com, or her book, Main Streets Come Back, which is a paperback version. So today's conversation, myself and Stephanie are going to be co-moderating the conversation. The first 30 minutes of the conversation will be prepared questions moderated by Stephanie. And then following that initial Q&A, we'll be opening it up to an audience Q&A. So we do ask that you write any of the questions that you have in the chat throughout the conversation. And then at the end, during that time, one of us will ask your questions to Mary. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Stable. I'm pronounced she, they. I am the Student Young Immersion Planners rep for the LGBTQ and Planning Division, and I'm also a regional planner based out of Los Angeles, California.
All right, and with that said, we will turn it over to Mary. Mary, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm now seeing that on the screen, my screen says notes for Mary Means. Hi, I'm Mary Means, and for many decades now, I've been very active in the whole arena of town center revitalization. Once beginning at the National Trust for Historic Preservation many years ago, where we kind of started what's become Main Street America today, and also operating my own what I called small but mighty planning consulting firm for many years. I had the pleasure of working with planners and others all over the country. So that's me. I'm now retired and getting into good trouble every time I can.
Thank you, Mary. All right, I will stop sharing my screen and we'll start the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Nathan.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mary, so much for joining us. We do have a lot of questions for you. First of all, we know that you were the Midwest field person for the National Trust and Historic Preservation in 1970s, but what exactly was your assignment?
Well, that was the question I asked when the National Trust hired me. And they hired me, I was to open an office in the Midwest. And I said, what am I supposed to do? And they just said, make preservation happen in 10 states. Well, there weren't many preservation organizations. The National Register was relatively new. And I traveled a lot in these 10 states the first couple of years and began to see recurring patterns. But I also knew that we had some conditions that were making it difficult. Most of these communities were very isolated. Remember, readers or listeners, there was no internet back then. And people had no way of kind of finding out what was going on 50 miles away from them. So we didn't have much information to share with them about case studies of successful preservation. And I was also finding that as we were defining preservation as kind of a curatorial approach of restoring something as closely as possible to its original condition, that absolutely was not flying in the very practical Midwest. It was like, yeah, lady, that doesn't make any sense. So I figured we're going to really have to find a way to make this a lot more meaningful and relevant to people, just general people outside the little preservation bubble. But my job was to help organizations, preservation organizations, form and be successful advocates for historic preservation in the last days, really, of urban renewal. So it was a big challenge.
That's amazing. And I know you mentioned that there was no internet, but when did you realize that this could become a national thing? When did you realize this could be so huge?
Well, when I'll start a little earlier than that. When, excuse me, at the National Trust, we figured, well, nobody is creating information that's helpful on I want to say, systemic basis,
Hmm.
like case studies and making them available widely. So we started looking at what could work in small towns. These buildings were not going to be museums. They were going to have to earn their keep. We knew nothing about how small business operated or any of that kind of thing. So we did a lot of background research, talking to a lot of people, and finally decided that we really needed to get some on the ground experience so that what we put out would be very credible. So we decided to do a 3-year project with 3 towns. They turned out to be Hot Springs, South Dakota, Galesburg, Illinois, and Madison, Indiana. And we would put a staff person in each of these for 3 years to work with the local community. We were invited in, by the way. You had to apply and be, competitively selected.
Hmm.
And then what we were learning there, we would gather and do a book, conferences, a film, and then we would have solved that problem and we could move on to the next.
Hmm.
So we really didn't sense that it was going to do more than accomplish this, which was a lot when you think about it, cramming it into 3 years. But from the very moment that we announced it, the media jumped on it, something I really hadn't expected. It's like we were David, and the shopping centers that were raging all over the country that were kind of killing main streets was Goliath. And here we are, this puny little office was preservationists of all people. We're going to try to do something about this. So we began to get a lot of coverage from all over the country. And that made me realize pretty soon that this was really bigger than the Midwest, and it was bigger than historic preservation. Um, so, with that in mind, fast forward 3 years of gathering information, gathering statistics on it, because we knew we were going to have to prove it with
Hmm.
data points, and the amount of interest we were getting in conferences and things like that. Um, we knew we had to do something, and yet all our grant money was evaporating. So we managed, and this is covered in exquisite detail in the Main Streets Comeback book, but we knew we had to find the funding to keep it going,
Hmm.
which we were able to do. And we're able, with that funding, to take it to the next level from 3 towns to seeing if it would work in 6 very different states, each of them with 5 communities. It worked really well there, and we were off and running. And nearly 50 years later, Main Street America is the result of that. And there are about 2,000 towns and urban corridors across the country that are using the what we were developing in the way of an approach to bringing life back to their town centers. It's really been amazing.
That's awesome.
I wish I could tell you that I strategized the whole thing, but frankly, I think calling it the Main Street Project had a lot to do
Mhm.
with it. If we'd called it Downtown Revitalization, crickets, no one would ever have heard from us again. But it was a brand that touched people's hearts. It was a lot more than buildings.
That's incredible. I know that you mentioned that there was eventually a lot of media coverage, but even then, what do you think people still misunderstand about how main streets work?
Well, I think these days there's like this lingering thing that it's just a lot of PR
Hmm.
and special events. And, there are those people that kind of put on festivals and stuff. It's not serious economic development.
Hmm.
Well, in truth, it's very serious economic development. And there are statistics over the last nearly 50 years that show how effective it is in creating businesses and in creating jobs, real jobs, and economic impact. And I think that's growing in recognition. There are a couple of states where the governors have actually used their state Main Street effort as part of their recruiting and presenting themselves as a business friendly environment on their economic development sites. So that's very fulfilling.
Would you say that there are any surprising unintended consequences from this type of work that you weren't really expecting?
Hmm. Yes and no. First of all, I did not realize starting out that the National Trust for Historic Preservation, remember that's who I was working for, that's who all of us were working for,
Hmm.
that the preservation community itself would be skeptical about all of this. And the skepticism was really pretty inherent everywhere. And it was kind
Hmm.
of like, this is Mary's project. This is not the National Trust project. Or, I mean, you know, and that was pretty hard to deal with. But I knew in my heart that what we were doing was really important. And it turns out, looking back, that what we were really doing was redefining preservation in a way that was more practical and more relevant to how people live their lives. Their hearts were in their town centers, and their town centers were dying and fading away. Their identity was going with it. So that what we were doing was causing them to say, these old buildings have value and we can't just let them go. And that was a surprising unintended consequence that I think it really did pretty much change preservation.
I love that. And thank you for continuing to fight for that despite all the resistance. I know that must have taken a lot.
I learned a great deal about trying to bring change to an organization that had historic preservation in its very title.
Hmm. Absolutely. And now taking a step back for a moment, because we do also want to learn a little bit about you. What was it like being a lesbian leader in planning during these years?
Well, I saw it when you submitted that question to me. I thought my instant response was, I wasn't a lesbian leader at the time. This was the 1970s. And yes, I was lesbian. I
Hmm.
didn't come out until I was in my late 30s, because had it been known that I was a lesbian, I probably would not have been hired by the National Trust. I probably would never have been able to do any of the things that I managed to accomplish with it. In
Hmm.
fact, that when I was hiring my first new staff member in the Midwest, I talked to my boss about what should I be looking for, and he said, "Well, you can't hire another woman because I don't want an all-woman office, and you can't hire anyone who's gay." And just
Whoa.
and I just thought for half a second and went, Russell, what's left with our pay scale? What am I going to do? We don't pay enough to get anything else.
Hmm.
So, but I guess the point is things have changed a great deal, and it may
Hmm.
be very difficult for younger people today to realize how important it was to have credibility to accomplish something like this, and how
Hmm.
it would immediately erode that credibility if it was known that you were part of the LGBT community.
That's wild. I mean, I know that you weren't necessarily out at the time, but do you feel like your private identity shaped your leadership approach?
Well, I think that in a way, because I had to hide my identity,
Mm-hmm.
I think it gave me kind of intuitively a greater empathy for people who were without power,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who were on the margins, and understand historic preservation had really been appealing to people who were kind of right at the top of that elite.
Mm-hmm.
What we were, I think, trying to do was really broaden that, and I think that definitely influenced who I wanted to get involved in it and who I wanted to be able to participate in it. Like from
Mm-hmm.
the very first, we were fond of saying Main Street is for everybody. And I
Mm-hmm.
can remember getting pushback from some of the Southern communities. Well, we didn't really mean everybody, did we? Yes, we did. So, and by the way, there are quite a lot of lesbian, gay, and trans people, professionals who are involved in Main Street America and these communities today. It has come a remarkably long, long way.
That's great to hear that things are slowly changing over time. I mean, I know that you mentioned, at least before, that there wasn't a lot of diversity in the field and wasn't a lot of openness towards embracing different people, but do you feel like the profession has changed over the years?
Oh, yes. I remember keynoting a conference at the National Trust, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago,
Hmm.
and including in my remarks to like, I don't know, a couple of hundred people there, was that it would have been unimaginable to me in 1973 when I went to work for them to
Hmm.
imagine that I would ever see a room that was filled with people wearing rainbow name tags. And they were National Trust members and National Trust staff. And it just
Hmm.
lifted my heart to be able to say, all of me can be safe here.
I love that. And then, so on the topic of that, what advice would you give to LGBTQ planners right now, especially emerging planners who are just getting into the field and don't really know what to expect?
I think um, some of the things that I think really make for success on any level is mastering soft skills, mastering the ability to listen as much as
Hmm.
anything else, and to try to put one's perceptions and the baggage that you carry in to the side as you're listening and try to hear what is being said and see that it's reflected in the kind of work that you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and to see that the folks who are not being heard very much really have their voices included in it as well. Planning until the Intermodal Surface Transportation Act, ICE-T, in the early 90s, public engagement was not required in most planning initiatives, and people would
Hmm.
find out about something as it was dropped on them. When ICE-T, that thing came along, we began to have to really involve people in a constructive way early. And I
Hmm.
spent a great deal of my career helping communities engage people effectively to do that. I think it's a skill that is essential today. There are all sorts of tech tools that let you do it inexpensively.
Hmm.
However, I don't think there's anything that builds trust, and trust is the first stone to collaborating or cooperating in something. I don't think there's anything like face-to-face communication with people in
Hmm.
order to begin to build that trust. So practice and get help with your soft skills and your ability to engage others, particularly others who are not professionals, who
Hmm.
don't understand this weird language and all these acronyms we use.
Hmm. Amazing. And then what about in terms of educating yourself? What are some things that planners who are seasoned planners, like what are some things that they should be continuously curious about?
I think to me, number one would be curiosity about how other people live,
Hmm.
who are people very different, and to begin to take them seriously. It troubles me a great deal right now to see the chasm as we become more partisan and as we wear our team colors
Hmm.
and lead with our team colors, or we're afraid to talk to someone because we can't see whether they are wearing our team's t-shirt or not.
Hmm.
And somehow we have to find some common grounds to be able to hear legitimate concerns or legitimate ideas from people who are not like us. And that does not just mean different races or different nationalities. It really means different mindsets too, and different socioeconomic levels.
Hmm. Absolutely. And hopefully we can, both within the planning profession, also the communities that we all serve. I hope we all can come to an agreement and work together to better serve each other because it's all about
Well,
community in the end.
I was heartened when I think it was last week, Main Street
Hmm.
America did a webinar called Connecting, Fostering Connections on Main Street.
Hmm.
And it was really acknowledging and underlining that the town center as a community meeting place and as a place that people hold near and dear because it's part of the town's identity and then part of theirs,
Hmm.
is that it's serving this function that definitely was not one of the 4 points of the Main Street approach when we started, but it's
Hmm.
connecting people. And never has there been a time when connecting people and building trust has been more important.
Hmm.
So it lasts and it will evolve over the decades, and there will be other benefits, I'm sure, besides fostering connection.
Hmm. Agreed. Yeah. Now, shifting gears slightly, because I do also want to talk about your memoir before we run out of time. Um, I wanted to know what led you to writing something worth saving.
Okay. Um, I was asked to close the only time they'd ever done the Main Street America National Conference by Zoom,
Hmm.
and it was during the pandemic. And they said, our people who've been on the front lines as businesses closed and as there was, what is the future going to hold for our businesses and all that? They're very
Hmm.
delicate. So please try to inspire them because it's been the worst year of their lives. So I thought long and hard, and I decided to put myself in their shoes and realized that I had been in their shoes. I had no idea what I was doing the whole time we were creating the Main Street effort and the whole time we were struggling to hold it together. So I decided to speak about that. And since they taped it ahead of time, I was able to see the chat as it, and I have never in all my years of public speaking had a response like that because I was being very vulnerable. I was talking
Hmm.
about how I'd been filled with doubts every day. And in seeing the emotion, suddenly just felt safe enough to really tell my own story and to also realize how important it was that stories like mine get out there because nearly everybody, particularly women, had this inner sense of doubt all the time. And the response to the memoir has been just phenomenal in terms of it's more than I could have hoped for. People writing and saying, your experience is so like mine, and it enabled me to have a tough conversation with my mother. Or this is just exactly how my life has been going, and you're now giving me heart and to stick with this of what I'm trying to do. So it was really good. And I'm enjoying the interaction it's giving me.
I love that. Out of curiosity, how did it feel to be so vulnerable with readers who, you don't know these readers. You don't know how they're going to take your memoir, or your
Right.
book. So how did it feel to actually come out with everything?
Well, I don't think I could have done it in an earlier decade of my life, but
Hmm.
I'm retired now, and there's something about aging that gives you a much clearer rear view mirror, and you
Hmm.
can see things differently. And as I said to someone who asked that same question, I'm in my 80s. I have nothing to lose. What can hurt me at this point about being vulnerable? Um, and it actually felt very good. The writing of the memoir was looking at the various separated dots in my life and seeing arising from that the dots reconnecting in a different way. And it really helped me understand myself better.
Amazing. And given all the work that you've done and how open you've been about your journey so far, how do you think resilience and identity impacts community work? How does it come out in the work that we do out with the folks that we serve?
I think resiliency is a very underrated and underappreciated condition.
Hmm.
And if we're going to survive the next several decades and beyond, resiliency has got to be almost front of mind, is whatever we're going through, there's a high probability that we're going to get through it, one
Hmm.
fashion or another, but we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it changed. And if we're fortunate and are able to take the right steps, which we won't know at the time, we'll come through it better. On the identity side of it, I can't tell you, I probably can, I can't tell you how much energy it has released in me and how much confidence of being able to say, I'm Mary Means, I am a lesbian who is happily married to an absolutely wonderful lesbian, and we've been married for 16 years. And both of us have done very good things in the world. And part of it
Mhm.
is because of who we are. A lot of it is because of who we are. The full identity of me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That just made me feel so happy. Another question is for folks who are still not entirely out in their profession, what advice would you give them? Because I know you also mentioned that you weren't out for a while, at least until you were 38. So can you talk about your journey in that way?
Yeah, first of all, I certainly know that because I've worked all over tiny towns, crossroads villages, big
Hmm.
cities, university campuses, all of that. And people are in different places geographically, and those
Hmm.
geographic places are in a very different point on their own scale of knowledge and acceptance of the full identity of someone. So I'm not going to give advice that says everybody has to come out tomorrow.
Right.
I will say that if you get through, if you're resilient enough to make it through the doing of that, it's great on the other side. It's great outside that closet. There are no more mothball smells from being in it, you know.
Hmm.
But um, but I guess the advice I would give is to just be as whole as you can be and be in enough places that are safe for you to be out to begin to grow this self-knowledge and confidence to come fully out. It's
I
not
love
for the
that.
faint of heart,
Hmm.
but I don't think there are very many LGBTQ people who are not brave. However, the T part of this is still very much a problem, the trans community. And I'm
Hmm.
deeply saddened by it. I have many trans friends. In my church, which is a very progressive Unitarian church, we have a number of parents of trans kids. And all of this, the last few years in particular, has just been incredibly traumatic and painful. So
Hmm.
I still have hope for it working out, but right now it seems to be a very convenient, unfortunate whipping post for those who would like to take our country back,
Hmm.
back to then, not back to greatness at all.
Hmm. Absolutely. And hopefully somehow we as planners can continue to um, support our trans and non-binary communities, whether it be by, giving a spotlight to other trans or non-binary planners
Yeah.
or other community leaders. That would be amazing. Just hold them up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it would also do some good to be holding up some of the people in their work environment who
Hmm.
work with them every day, and it's no big deal.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now, when it comes to your memoir, what is one thing that you hope readers take away from it? I mean, apart from, coming out or staying in, but trying to be whole, what is something else that you hope readers take away?
Um, I think take one of the takeaways would be um, that most readers will find themselves, I think, in this book because we all have our doubts. We all have that imposter demon living within us, no matter
Hmm.
how successful we are. So that this at least will say, this is not just me. Many other people who are that I look up to have wrestled with this themselves as well. That's a really important part of it. The other piece of it is my mother played a very traumatic role in my life. I think that
Hmm.
often happens. She also played a very nurturing role in my life. And in the course of writing the memoir, I came to have a great deal more empathy for my mother. And by the time the book was completed, it really helped me heal the unhealed parts of my relationship with my mother, who had died many years before. So I think that's an important thing for potential readers to know too.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that response. And thank you for being so candid in your responses so far. I really appreciate that.
Well, I have been known to be too candid at times, but
Not at all.
that's for another webinar. Mary's greatest near misses.
I love that. Okay, so we are officially at 11:30. I did also want to open the floor up to some live questions and answers from the
Okay.
audience. So, audience, if you do have any questions that you would like to ask Mary, please put them in the questions and we'll be reading them out. The first question that we have is, I get that really quickly, a reminder about the book giveaway poll. If you would like to be enrolled in the poll and potentially receive one of the free books, please put your name and your contact info in the push poll that just sent out. Wonderful. Okay. Back to the questions. First question is from Karen. I get that in-person communication is key during community outreach, but what should planners do today to reach those community members who are afraid to be out in public in this political environment?
Um, there are, this didn't exist in my day, but there are so many social media outlets that it is impossible for just about anybody to not be connected in some fashion that way. And they can be made, some of them very private, so that one can have a community around you, even if you're in deepest, darkest Idaho, um, or places that are far removed from the more progressive parts of the country. And I think it's probably using those social media outlets and fostering dialogue, conversation with other members of your tribe.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question is from Katie. Of all of your accomplishments, what makes you the proudest?
I have to say that it was like a couple of weeks ago with this webinar about fostering connection
Mhm.
and fostering community. Because I really do think that the future of this, we know it works from an economic development standpoint, the Main Street effort, and we know how important it is for the community to raise the self-image of the community and its residents. But we learned during the pandemic and during disasters that because these Main Street organizations have built trust by knowing it's a very volunteer-oriented thing. So all these volunteers know each other from working on something together, and they built trust, which means that is a platform for recovery from disasters. It's also because we showed it in during the pandemic, those communities were able to bounce back a lot quicker than the ones that didn't have this kind of level of trust and down to an organization. But to then say, not only is it resilience, but in a time where we need to be able to talk to one another as a place and a platform for fostering connection is just one of the unintended consequences that I'm deeply proud of.
Thank you. Next question is from Anna. What should allies prioritize to best support our LGBTQIA plus friends and neighbors?
If you could repeat that, please.
Yeah. What should allies prioritize to best support our LGBTQIA plus friends and neighbors?
I think being there for them, um, and to me, that could take all sorts of shapes, but part of it could well be helping make the playing field a little bit more even for them. This might be being active politically. It might be um, reaching out in terms of personal relationships so that you who are an ally get to know a range of LGBTQ people because we're not all alike at all, and our circumstances are not all alike. But I think it's most helpful if you can recognize also that there are times when as well-meaning as you are, there may be times when the LGBTQ folks need to be by themselves and they don't need allies in the room. I've learned this in my own church congregation where we have parents sometimes and sometimes very well-meaning, very liberal people who feel like we're resegregating ourselves. No, we need a place to heal and to be together. And to me, that's a really important thing that's overlooked in allyship.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Next question is from Shane. We have a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so some context. Main Street America's recent director survey reported that 24% of local programs have LGBTQ plus representation on their boards. Do you think this movement has something special that attracts and supports LGBTQ stakeholders?
I don't know. I would love to be able to say, no, that's just the way America is right now, but we all know it's not.
Hmm.
I do think that in our hearts, Main Street Main Street programs are making room for everyone. That's what it's all about.
Hmm.
And maybe that's projecting a sense of safety. I also, and of being able to be an accepted and active member of the community. Um, there's also that Main Street America as an organization has really been promoting and lifting up opportunities for a greater representation of minorities and LGBTQ folks as well. So they're getting a good message from all directions right now.
Absolutely. And hopefully it keeps going.
Yes, exactly.
Next question is from Michael. Main Street programs often celebrate heritage. How do you expand the definition of heritage to include communities like LGBTQIA plus people whose histories are often hidden?
Well, we're going to get through the next several years of
Mhm.
top-down would-be leadership. Um, I right now I'm reading Lonnie Bunch, was the first director and really founder of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm reading his memoir and book, and it so strikes a chord with me about the challenges of mainstreaming a long, long neglected or sidelined important dimension of American history. And I would encourage others to read it. I'm late in reading it. I should have read it 10 years ago. Uh, but it is such a vital part of if we're ever going to heal, if we're ever going to get anywhere closer to a more perfect union, we can't do it by trying to brush aside the parts of it that we don't agree with or the parts that trouble us. Um, we can live through uncomfort, but we can't live through just complete disregard.
Absolutely. And yes, histories are hidden, I want to add, but it's out there. If you go out and find it, if you talk to people, if you visit certain sites, locations that used to be really popular amongst the queer community, it's there. We just need to find it and give it a voice.
Yeah, yeah. Good observation. Good
Hmm.
observation.
Thank you. Next person is Michelle. Michelle wants to know, do you believe in do you believe a created main street via an overlay zone or through a PUD that creates a downtown feeling can evolve to be an economic driver and as important to a community like an organically developed main street?
There are all sorts of dimensions, I think, to that question.
Hmm.
My first thought before you got more than about 15 seconds into it was do not lead with regulation. Do not
Hmm.
lead with designation. People get very scared about that kind of thing. But then I began to see where you were going with it. Is it a place that doesn't have an obvious feel of a town center or a community center? Can you bring more of that feel to it through this kind of approach? I think you can. The one that I just find um, my eyes roll at it is how the developers of shopping centers today or lifestyle centers or mixed use developments are basing a lot of their exterior design on a main street. You've seen them. They're like little fake main streets. And
Hmm.
one of the ways you can tell is they all are required to have ground floor retail, and it all has to have the same height ceilings and everything else. And but it's kind of silly. And I really don't think that those are going to become places that are loved by the community no matter what. I can't see people rallying around a created commercial, private developed, quote, Main Street place. I may be wrong, but I bet I'm not.
I love it. Thank you. And then we have a question from Isabel. When we're thinking about urban design and placemaking in our downtowns, what are some best practices for creating physical spaces that feel safe and inclusive for LGBTQ plus folks?
Wow. That's kind of hard to say. I would say places that feel safe for people, particularly women and children. Because if women and children can feel safe, the place is really pretty safe. Um, and I think that would mean creating places where people can have informal conversations, cluster, stop on the street, you bump into someone and you start talking and you realize we've been talking for 10 minutes and it would be nice to sit down. It would be nice if there was a bench there. And it would be nice if there were two benches facing one another, and things like that. I would be wanting to locate activity areas for families with kids in such a fashion that they're not likely to be near more adult-oriented traffic generators, and places that are maybe a little off the, and to also particularly to make them safe from vehicular confrontations from traffic. Uh, yeah, I would say think about how anyone feels safe in a space
Hmm.
and what you can do physically to make that possible or enhance that. Lighting also has a good bit to do with it. I know there are places that have a narrow corridor to the parking in the rear. If that's well lighted, and if the walls have murals or something on them, so it doesn't just look like an uninviting um, Berlin Wall, that would help too.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then I also had a question myself. I was wondering, what did you do you think that the field was relatively receptive to you coming out when you did? How was that change for you?
I came out quite gradually.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll tell you that there have been a couple of times when I was on the verge of being outed.
Hmm.
And one of them was in a Southern community where my firm was doing the visioning and getting very disparate people, racial and everything, together. And a number of the big guys had wanted it not to happen.
Hmm.
And I was doing interviews with a whole range of community leaders. And one of the questions we were asking, these are confidential interviews, was who do people trust here? And a black woman, middle-aged black woman, thought for a minute. She said, um, you know, or I remember that was one of the questions, but the one that prompted this was, um, tell me what maybe some of the potholes are that I wouldn't know about that I could accidentally step in here. And she
Hmm.
thought about it for a while. And she said, well, these folks aren't used to seeing a woman in charge of anything. And I had heard the day before that the rumor was among the big dogs that I was gay. And I'd spent a sleepless night kind of going, if this comes out, they could easily not just sack me, but they could stop this entire process because of that. So I was
Hmm.
desperately worried about it. But when she said they're just not used to seeing a woman in charge, light bulb went off. That's all this is. And they don't have any way of describing that feeling except to say she's probably gay.
Whoa. Okay. Dang.
And by the way, those same big dogs who tried to kill it were writing op-ed pieces 2 years later saying this was the greatest exercise our community has ever done. So,
Wow. I mean, you sounds like you handled it like a champ though. You,
well, that's another thing is don't react immediately.
yeah.
Just take the time to process it and see where it goes.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that
Well, thanks for
story. I really
asking that
appreciate
one.
it. Of course. We have another question from Bonnie. Mary, as someone who experienced an unsupportive and toxic workplace, what advice would you give to planners entering workplaces or workspaces that are not supportive and or do not provide agency to new staff?
Well, my hunch is that those who are at an entry level are very likely to encounter this. And I guess the advice would be to recognize it when you see it. Try to hear yourself say, this is not about me. This is about a system. It might be about you. You might be doing something that is causing this, but you might find a gentle way to find out if your behaviors or your attitude or something is a problem and then working on it. But
Mhm.
if that's not one, then dealing with it, I think, in a really diplomatic way, not burning bridges. You'd never want to do that as a younger planner, but it ought to teach you some questions or things to be looking for as you look for that next position in a different organization and maybe even a different community.
Absolutely. And if I may also give a quick plug for the division, yes, the workplace, workspace might not necessarily be super welcoming, but the division is. We have coffee chats twice a month. Come vent, talk to us, ask for advice. Like really, we're here for you. Really do empathize, and we want to make sure that we can support each other because that's what community is about. That's what our LGBTQ community is for. We're here to support each other and be here for one another. So please use us as much as you need to.
I'd love to put in a quick pitch that in April, Something Worth Saving, my memoir, is going to be the Women in Planning Division's book club selection for April, and there'll be a similar webinar to this later in April.
I love it. Yes, please sign up for that webinar. I believe, Nathan, can we share the link to that as well?
Sorry, to which one, the webinar on March 26th?
March,
For women,
it's
women in
April.
planning.
Oh, Women in Plannings.
Yeah.
We can, I don't have the link for that, but I would be happy to send it out. So I know Michelle's in the meeting. So I'll work with Michelle from WPD, Women in Planning Division, and get that out to the registrants.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary, for that reminder. And I believe we are out of time. I do want to thank you so much for being on here, taking your time to answer all these questions, for being so candid, and for being so open with us. I know these conversations don't happen very often. I know that folks in our community don't get the mic as often as, folks who aren't in this community. So I, again, really appreciate you telling your story and being open. And I really appreciate you writing your memoir. I plan on reading it because your story sounds so amazing. And some of the different challenges that you've had, just, I look forward to learning from you.
Well, that would be wonderful. And I'm going to ask that all of you who read it, each of you, give me some kind of a review if you email it to me or if you post something of where you get it. I'm embarrassed that Main Street's Comeback is now only available through Amazon. That happened day before yesterday and don't ask me why, but there was no other way to be able to distribute it. But I'd love reviews of either one of them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. And thank you to everyone who's attending this webinar. Really appreciate you spending this hour with us. Again, if you would like to be included in that poll and sign up for one of the free books, please do so. And then also a reminder that this webinar is eligible for CM credits if you are AICP certified. So if you would like more information about that, please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I will pass the mic back over to Nathan to close us out.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Mary, for the great conversation today. I don't have anything else, so I see we're about to close the poll. Go ahead and get your submission in. We will send out an email to all of the registrants shortly with uh, the webinar that Mary's doing with the Women in Planning Division in a few weeks, and then also our upcoming webinar for the LGBTQ Planning Division to focus on Main Street programs across the country. But that's all we have today. We appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll see you in the future at other programs.
Thanks a bunch, Nathan.
My pleasure.